Welcome to another episode as part of our ongoing SR Snodgrass podcast series. I'm Lenore, Seifer, the Director of Human Resources, and today I'm welcoming back Jeremy Burris. Jeremy is a Principal and Director in our Information Technology Services. Welcome back, Jeremy.
Thanks, good to be here.
So today we're talking about quantum computing. It sounds like a lot, just those words alone. Who are we talking to today? What are we going to be covering here?
Yeah, we're talking to anybody, C-suite people, IT people. This is a topic that used to be science fiction 30 years ago. They've been working on quantum computing. It kind of relates a lot to, cold fusion energy that they're still trying to work on. But recently they've made some headways in that area of technology, and it's really going to kind of change what we've been working on technology-wise and security-wise for the last 30 to 50 years. All of that's about to change within the next couple of years. So anybody who kind of works in an industry that is technology-based, that's who we're talking to today.
And by meaning technology-based, we're talking about anyone that basically uses technology.
Yep, absolutely. Anybody who's
Any
got
type of
data
business
they're trying to secure, anybody who's using computers at all, this is for them.
And this is going to affect anyone from small businesses to large as well. So you're not exempt because you're too small, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those topics if you're waiting for the larger companies to kind of jump on board first and then duplicate them, you're going to fall behind fast.
So you mentioned about timing. So we're talking about it now. Is it here now? Is this something that people should already have in place, or is it something that they need to start putting into place? And if so, over what type of time frame are we looking at?
Yeah, so last month Google unveiled their product called Willow, which kind of brings quantum computing here now. It's been one of those science fiction topics for the last 30 years, but it's a reality now. They have kind of cracked the code, and within the next 2 years they're going to have applications that actually use quantum computing. So quantum computing's here, and the applications that use it are coming very fast. So as far as what do our clients and what do people in the technology industry need to do, they need to start looking at their control environment now, because that all has to change within the next 2 to 3 years as quantum computing applications come out.
So when they're looking at that, and again, it's not just the IT group that should be looking at this, to be clear, it's the top management level should also be involved in this, because it's going to affect the way their operations run then.
Yep, absolutely, yep.
So can you give me a couple of high-level examples that we can all understand? Because we're not all technology people, of course.
Right.
And I know that you are, but can you give us a couple of examples of what does this do? Like, what are some examples of how this can help benefit companies, maybe?
Yeah, sure. So my favorite example is encryption. If you take the longest encryption that probably Department of Defense and all of the super secret agencies are using now, and you took today's supercomputer that has nothing to do with quantum computing and you said, okay, crack that encryption, it would take 10 to the 25th power years, 10 septillion years, longer than the universe has been around, for the supercomputers of today to crack that. If you used quantum computing, it would take 5 minutes. So that is kind of the scale of how things are going to change with quantum computing. That's my favorite example. Other examples that I kind of look at is, if we don't have encryption, for example, what are we going to do with authentication? Hopefully we're going to be moving towards things like multi-factor authentication that doesn't rely on encryption, but then that's encryption in transit, and there's encryption at rest, and that gets technical. But other examples of where quantum computing is going to be used is possibly in the medical field, to be able to say, okay, we need a cure for COVID, and instead of having today's supercomputers try to crunch the numbers, a quantum computer is going to be able to do it much faster. So there are some good applications for it, but obviously anytime there's applications that can be used for the good, there's going to be applications that can be used for the bad. And I think encryption and cracking encryption is probably the best example I can think of as something we wouldn't want to happen, but it's going to happen.
So that's actually kind of what I was thinking in my mind. You're talking about how it can be used for encryption in a good way, but also then there's the other side, that if you're only relying on data encryption for security, you're probably putting some data at risk then.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why I kind of say the control environments are going to have to change. We have so many technologies today that rely on the fact that computers just aren't good enough to crack this code, and now they're going to be. So we need to kind of go back and take a look at our control environments and say, okay, if this encryption that used to take 10 septillion years to crack can now be cracked in 5 years, what are we going to do? And those are technologies that are going to take a year or two to implement, and we can't just wait until quantum computing's here to start implementing them, because then it's going to take us a year or two to find the solutions. So that's why I think we need to start talking about the control environment now and how that's going to change, and start making those changes now, or the banking industries and all the industries that we do work for are going to be behind the gun.
So I know that whether it's our clients or just in general businesses that are out there, they don't always have the resources by which they can start to look into this. And so I want to, address that. We can talk more about some of the benefits and risks too, but I'm kind of curious. The immediate thought is, well, this is going to cost a lot of money. There's a lot of information here, and maybe we don't have the person in that type of role that can start dedicating their time and resources to this. What do they do?
Yeah, so we have clients large and small. Some of them, as you mentioned, are not going to be large enough to have their own IT staff. They outsource these to vendors. Most of our clients have risk assessments that they already kind of look over once a year, and those are not things that a vendor needs to be involved with to sit down at a board level or a C-suite level and start looking at your risks. Taking this topic as the next topic that you need to add to your risk assessment and start talking about, okay, like, what's this going to change? Because it's going to change everything. Talking about that, but then starting to look at the vendors that they already use, and are those vendors going to be able to help get them to the next level? And if not, we can help. Whether it's us directly helping, which we do with some of our clients, ones that there's no independence issues with, we can certainly step in and fill that role. Or if there are independence issues and we can't step in, we've got other vendors that we partner with, other vendors that we can recommend that we know can take them to that next level. But I think to start, sitting down with that risk assessment, looking at that control environment and saying, oh, well, that could change. Knowing what quantum computing is so that you can identify areas where the controls are going to need to change. And again, if that's a conversation that they're not ready to have with the board because they don't even know what quantum computing is, we can have that conversation with the board. There are no independence issues there for us to just talk to the board and educate them.
So, and it's interesting to hear you talk about that, and especially with vendors and that risk assessment, because it's really not just about how it's going to affect their IT department. It's really about how it's going to affect the organization as a whole, whether it's their customer data, whether it's HR's type of things, whether it's other vendors that they're working with. It seems to be very wide-reaching and wide-encompassing too.
Yep, and I would say not only, you kind of already hit on, it's not just their IT department. It's not even their bank or their industry. It's the world. The world is going to change with quantum computing. So, very famous people, and I don't have direct quotes, but they have been quoted saying, if you're not changing, you're dying. This is going to kill a lot of industries if they don't start talking about it now.
So it starts with the risk assessment.
I would say that would be,
controls.
especially if you're a small institution, a small company that has no idea what they're doing or doesn't have their own IT staff, at least start with your risk assessment, learn what quantum computing is through this podcast and through other educational, sites, and start looking at, what types of controls you have, and if those controls are relying on the fact that computers just can't crack this, it's coming in the next probably 2 to 3 years. You're not going to be able to say, oh, well, computers can't do that yet, because they will very soon. And as I said earlier, if you're waiting until they have applications that can do that, then it's going to take you a year or two after it's live to implement the right controls, and you're going to be vulnerable in that time frame.
So we'd mentioned at the beginning that this is really for management, the C-suite in terms of audience, but it also sounds like you had mentioned too the board of directors, different things like that. So again, it's about the decision makers and making sure that there is some education going on, because it's not a topic that most of us are familiar with. So really starting with understanding what it is, what's coming, and preparing for that.
Yep, and if they're a big enough institution to have IT folks there, and maybe those IT folks aren't always invited to the board level conversations, this is probably a good time to invite the technical people that maybe know a little bit more about what quantum computing is and what it's going to be able to accomplish in the next 2 to 3 years. So I would encourage even larger institutions that have IT staff, start inviting them to the board at least long enough to talk about what's going to change. I've said it before, everything's going to change. So,
right.
So having the technical people there that maybe can bring it down to a layman's terms and explain to the higher ups, like, this is what's going to change and this is why, and we need to start adjusting now.
That sounds great. Jeremy, let's talk about how quantum computing is going to affect business operations from a day-to-day perspective. Are there some opportunities that, let's talk specifically even about a mid-size banking financial institution. Mm-hmm. How's it going to affect those day-to-day operations? What are they going to see? Can you give me an example or two?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 examples that come to mind. One would be in the area of marketing. How do you if we're talking about financial institutions, how do we market our mortgages to people? And today I don't think the systems that are being used are doing a terrible job. They're giving you a big list of, here's 500 people in your area that might be looking for a mortgage. I think quantum computing could really take that to the next level and make it very specific to, especially with, AI and all the information sharing going on. I think it's going to narrow down that list, but in narrowing down that list, it's going to make it very much more, these are people we know that are actively looking to buy a house, or actively looking to get a home equity line of credit, or actively looking to buy a car. I think we're going to see marketing in that area. And again, not to say that the systems being used today are terrible, but they give you very lengthy, long reports, and you find a lot of what I would say false positives, like, we think this person might be interested in a mortgage in the next 5 years, but 5 years is a long way down the road. I think quantum computing is going to take that marketing to a whole nother level and make it really fine-tuned and make the leads that they're giving the financial institutions so much better leads and so much more of a percentage of success.
So with that, though, that's interesting, because when you think about what it used to be and how they used to have to market versus getting some more targeted lists, but now you're saying it's going to really narrow that down. Mm-hmm. So instead of having a lot of people not responding, rejections, I'm not looking now, you're saying that it's going to be basically, here's a small list of people who you need to target, and they most likely would have a better success rate then.
Yeah, I think that, and I think the scripts are going to change. And, your typical cold call of, hey, you've been in your house 10 years and we kind of think maybe you might be looking for a change, as opposed to now the script's going to be, hey, we understand that you're actively looking to purchase a house. Do you have a mortgage, company in mind? Or, I think the scripts are going to have to change, because the data that you're going to be getting is going to be so much more fine-tuned, if you will. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be a guess based on this person's been in their house 10 years. Usually people move after 10 years. It's going to be, no, we know this person is looking on Zillow, or we know this person is, looking on, KBB.
Whoever else. Yeah, right. So it's really about the reliability and validity of the data then is going to be so much stronger than even it currently is. So again, it's just improving that process, which I'm sure that, both marketing teams and the loan people are kind of saying, okay, that could be a real, and even, management could be saying that's a really great benefit. Mm-hmm. To focus our resources on specific people then.
Yeah, I think the efficiency is going to go through the roof, and instead of wasting half your day doing cold calls that, as you mentioned, people just hang up, or people just like, nope, I'm not really looking right now, it's going to be 10 years or whatever. I think we're going to see much more time actually talking to people who really are in the business for a mortgage, in the business for a car loan.
So you said that key word, efficiency.
Yeah,
and everybody likes the idea of improving their efficiency.
Absolutely.
So give me another example then.
Yes, another example probably hits home with you is human resources. I know right now I'm hearing stories of people posting jobs on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden within 10 minutes they're getting 1,000 resumes, and they're looking through these, and they're either AI generated, or it's kind of like, I don't even know if this is a real person, and if it is a real person, there's no way they applied for this within 10 minutes on their own. I think quantum computing is going to kind of be able to weed out some of, maybe not false positives, but like, this person's not really really taking the time and doing the research on our company. They're just doing something with AI and throwing it out there and applying to every single job that has this title. I think it's going to weed out, from an HR perspective, have the ability to kind of weed out some of those job applications that you're manually going through now. And as I said, I'm hearing horror stories of, okay, we posted this 10 minutes ago, we have 1,000 resumes.
And there's no way you can go through that without having the staff and everything else. I mean, that's
So again, assuming they come out with applications for that, that's another area of efficiency. You like that word?
I do.
Another area of efficiency of, the HR people not having to weed through thousands of resumes when half of them were submitted within 10 minutes and they're not real. Or they are real, it's just they didn't take the time to even know who your company is. And
or using bots and things like that.
Yeah,
really.
So I think that's another good example. And we could go on and on because, as I said earlier, I think everything's going to change, but I think those are two good examples.
And that's a really good idea. I like how you gave those examples too, because it is really showing and giving us an understanding of how it's not just affecting, this is not just an IT department problem. Mm-hmm. It is a business area that people really need to focus on and start preparing for, because it will be affecting literally every part of operations.
Yep. And as I said earlier, adapt or die. This is one of those turning points where you're either going to be able to become massively efficient and really improve your processes, or you're going to fall behind all the other people in your industry.
So let's just briefly mention again too, as we get a little further into the topic and understanding how widespread this is going to be overall, it's, again, not just the IT department. Those clients, those companies out there that don't have an IT department, what do they do?
Yeah, and we touched on it earlier, but I think they need to pair with the right vendors. Give us a call. Again, no independence issues assumed. We can help out directly. If there are independent issues, we can kind of point you in the right direction of some other vendors that we know that can.
But still education and things like that we're able to provide.
Yep, we can always provide education. There's no independence issues with us going in, talking to a board, educating them on.
But my understanding also is that we actually are the IT department for certain clients.
Absolutely, yeah. We serve as virtual CISOs. We serve as IT departments. We function as internal
help fill in
audits,
wherever kind of needed, whatever that need is.
If it's an IT area and you need assistance, we can help. And I think this is one area that could be up and coming, where even as you mentioned, even from an education standpoint, like, we don't even know what this is. Can you come in and talk to our board for a half hour? But yeah, if there's something in IT that needs done, we've probably done it and can probably do it again. And this is just going to be one of those other topics that we just have to add to the list of things that we know how to control and know how to assess the risks for.
Work with the clients and stuff. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the other sides of this, from more of, instead of using it from almost like an opportunity standpoint, a little bit more from the risk standpoint. You'd already mentioned it's most likely affecting data encryption. Just real quick, what are some of those other areas that people are kind of going to have to watch out for from that standpoint?
Yeah, from a risk standpoint, authentication, encryption, artificial intelligence. We talked in one of our other podcasts about, AI-based systems that are kind of learning what's normal for your network and then watching when something not normal happens. And I think quantum computing is going to make those defense mechanisms better. But at the same time, quantum computing is going to make the attacks against them better. So I think there's some risk there. We've been telling a lot of our clients over the last 2 years, if you don't have some of those AI-based systems that are auto-blocking and learning your network, and this is not normal, that you're falling behind. And I think once quantum computing has real-life applications within the next 2 to 3 years being developed, I think you're going to be falling further behind if you don't have those. But quantum computing is going to both make the defense side better, but it's also going to make the attack side better. So from a risk standpoint, those are kind of the biggest risks I see to a lot of the industries from basically from the technology standpoint.
It's nice to hear not only that there are risks involved, but also that there are so many opportunities with this. And it's really the opportunity for businesses to change how things are being done and to be so much more efficient and really grow overall. So it's great to hear all of those. So it sounds like your recommendation then is now's the time. Get started now. And part of getting started now is about that education. So it's really about learning what it is and getting the right people, such as you and your team, involved in those early discussions to make sure people are on the right path.
And for a lot of our clients that outsource their cores or their major software packages to vendors, now is also the time to start pushing them to look at their control environments and how they're going to change. Because a lot of our clients, and when I say a lot, I mean if we have 120 banking clients in 11 states, I would say 110 of those right now are outsourcing their core to another vendor. We don't want to wait a year or two and then start talking to the Jack Henrys and the Fiservs and the FISs of the world to say, what are we going to do about this quantum computing problem? Because your whole software is going to need to change. We need to start talking to them about it now, because
so that it's already.
Those are big, huge companies, and sometimes it's a big boat. It takes a long time to turn it. So we need to start pushing those vendors now to start looking at those as well. So not only from an internal perspective, but looking at the vendors that these companies are using, because we've got big and small companies that outsource their core. And the same is true about the non-banking industries that we work in. There's not a vendor out there, there's not a client out there that we work with that doesn't outsource some part of their business, and they need to start talking to their vendors.
I'd say that's probably a pretty fair statement for most businesses out there,
Absolutely, yeah.
So it really starts with that education, getting the right people involved, including, internally many different departments that this is going to affect too. But it's an exciting time to get into all of this and to start making sure that you're being proactive about it, and that's really where we can help too.
Yep, I would say if you like change, it's an exciting time. For those that don't like change, it's kind of going to be a very nervous time for them.
Well, we're going to go on the exciting side of things with that. So to wrap up then, if anyone has questions, we recommend that they reach out to you. Our website, www.srsnodgrass.com. Follow you and connect with you and the firm on LinkedIn as well. Lots of resources out there, and I'm sure you're going to be providing additional ones, as well as you had already mentioned, those educational opportunities.
Yep, we'll have some articles coming out soon on the same topic, and we're planning on doing some speaking engagements this year on the same topic as well. So we'll be out there talking about this as well, but you can always reach out to me directly too.
It's great to be on the forefront of some of the technology and see that you guys are out there and helping everybody with it.
We try.
Well, thanks so much for coming back onto the podcast today. It was great to talk to you about this topic, and thanks so much for sharing about this overall and how it's going to affect businesses.
Thanks for having me.
At SR Snodgrass, we're always growing. We have offices in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Ohio, and West Virginia. Whether you're entry level, senior level, or somewhere in between, we invite you to check us out. Go to our website at www.srsnodgrass.com, follow us on LinkedIn, and join us on our quest for the best.